Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this morning on NIH Repays Your Student Loans, an in-depth overview of the NIH loan repayment program. Welcome. On the next slide, please. This webinar is being hosted by the Coordinating Center of the Resource Centers for Minority Aging Research at UCLA. With funding from the NIA, the Coordinating Center works to support the efforts of our RCMAR sites across the country and to disseminate processes, tools, and results that can positively impact the health of diverse older adults in the U.S. As a land-grant institution, UCLA and the RCMAR Coordinating Center acknowledges our presence on the traditional ancestral territory of the Gabrielino Tongva people. We hope you can take a minute to acknowledge the ancestral lands you are currently on. The staff at the Coordinating Center work really hard to provide you with updated information about opportunities and resources relating to aging in diverse communities. So we invite you to visit our website regularly for updates and announcements and to follow us on social media. Next slide. Just a few reminders before we begin. Please note that we are using Zoom webinar for today's session. This means that we can't hear or see our participants. So feel free to introduce yourselves using the chat function. Tell us your name and your institutional affiliation. This will give our speaker a sense of who's in the audience. Also, you can pose your questions to our presenter either using the chat or going to the Q&A button and submitting your question there. We will be distributing today's slides to registered participants and posting the session on our website once the recording is ready. Lastly, we have a great presentation in store for you today. We are thrilled to have Dr. Erica Boone, who is the director of the NIH Division of Loan Repayment, with us this morning. In this role, Dr. Boone is responsible for administering and providing leadership for the NIH loan repayment program, as well as representing NIH on matters related to operations, policy development, and evaluation of the LRPs. Prior to this position, Dr. Boone served as a health scientist administrator in the Office of Science Policy and Communications at NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, where she developed and targeted science-based publications, outreach initiatives, and other activities to educate a variety of audiences about the science of drug use, abuse, and addiction. Dr. Boone's academic background includes a BA in biology and a PhD in behavioral health. Welcome, Dr. Boone. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you all for having me today. I'm going to share my slide. I'll share my screen. All righty, I think, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Fantastic. And I will start off by saying that if anyone on the line hears whining, barking, or crunching, it is not me. It is my 13-year-old dog. And I tried to get him a snack so that he would go away and do things, but he still likes to be very close. So right now he's at the top of the stairs munching on a pig ear. So just act like you don't hear any of that. But welcome this morning. I'm so happy that you all are present and want to hear more about how the NIH loan repayment programs can help you in your research career. Alrighty, if you all have any questions, feel free to insert those into the chat. I think, Dr. Guerrero, they're not able to voice any questions, but they're able to put those in the chat, correct? All right, and we'll try to answer those questions as we move along. Thank you very much. Alrighty, so today's objective is to inform everyone on the call today about the benefits of the LRPs and also to give you a little brief update on certain aspects that are important to the application process. So we'll run a little bit through the programs, the description of the programs themselves, eligibility requirements, and then we'll delve into major application sections, wrap up, and then have plenty of time for our Q&A. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that there are some major updates to the LRPs if you have not already heard. And one of them is that starting last year, we increased the maximum award amount that a person is able to receive from $35,000 per year to $50,000 per year in qualifying educational debt. Now, of course, the amount that you receive is based on your educational debt level. So don't think you're going to floss around on money that you're getting from the NIH Lrps. The amount of money that you're going to be receiving is definitely based on your loan debt. Second is for health disparities. There's a health disparities research program expansion. What does that mean? Prior to last year, only one institute at the National Institutes of Health participated in funding Health Disparities Research Lrp program. Now that's been expanded, and we've seen almost a doubling of success rates between 2019 to 2020, because instead of having 400 applications come in and only 80 of them can get funded, just because there's only one IC that's able to fund, we're able to spread it across the 27 different institutes, actually 24 different institutes at NIH. Last is beginning in September, we're going to further expand LRP programs by initiating the Research in Emerging Areas Critical to Human Health LRP. This particular LRP will allow for ICs to kind of pinpoint emerging and gap areas, mission critical research areas that are important to them that they're not able to fund based on the current LRPs that are available. So some of the previous or current LRP programs might be a little bit limiting on who's eligible to be able to apply and receive an LRP. This particular LRP allows for NIH to be a bit more expansive. So like, for example, veterinarians that are doing more translational work would never have been eligible to participate in the LRPs, and now they can. There's a particular institute, or rather office at NIH, that's really interested in bringing in veterinarians that are doing translational work, and now they can do that with the REACH program. We'll talk a little bit more about that one later. As you all are aware, there are 27 different institutes at the National Institutes of Health, and they all have differing research foci and mission. However, we all have the unifying goal of supporting research training and career development of the next phase of the biomedical research workforce, and of course that includes you. This graphic is a little bit busy, but really what I want to call your attention to is that while an investigator is only eligible to apply for and receive different mechanisms for a very shortened period of time, like for example, a K08, R25, K22, you're able to apply for and receive an LRP for a wider swath of your career. So it goes from the point in time where you receive your doctoral level degree all the way up into when you're an established investigator. So if you've ever heard, well, I'm past 5 years past my degree, or I'm 5 years past residency, I don't think that I'm eligible to apply, that's just not so. And we do have some people who do have R01s that participate in the program. However, we do try to focus on individuals that are a bit earlier stages of their career. But with that being said, wide swath of time that an individual is eligible to apply for a loan repayment program award. I'm pretty sure you all know how this works, is that we recognize that educational loan debt is a significant barrier to an investigator that is trying to initiate or even to sustain their research career. With that in mind, Congress and NIH got together. They created the loan repayment program to really be impactful at that bridging point of those vulnerable career decision points in an investigator's life, where they're making the decision between whether they're going to stay in research or whether they're going to go off into more viable, more lucrative research fields. And this is how it works. If you can commit to performing research in what NIH considers to be mission critical research areas for at least 2 years, then we can commit to repaying up to $50,000 per year in your qualifying educational debt. Because this is considered to be taxable income, we also assist you with covering federal taxes up to the amount of 39%. Why is that important? Because we don't want to give you the loan repayment. Let's just say you get the maximum $50,000. It seems as if you've gotten a raise of $50,000. There are tax implications for that at the beginning of the next year. We don't want this to represent a double-edged sword for you, so we're going to help out with that. So we're hoping that the outcome is to increase our nation's stock of biomedical researchers that are ready to be impactful with regards to diseases and disorders that are not only important here in the United States, but across the world. So now let's talk a little bit about the LRP subcategories. There are currently now 6 of them. So the first one is the clinical research LRP, and this is for individuals who are conducting more patient-oriented research. They have to, while they don't have to be conducting clinical trials, a lot of people think that this particular program is for individuals who are conducting clinical trials, and that's just, it's not limited to that. So an investigator has to be engaged in more patient-oriented research. So they have to have their hands on some sort of specimen from a human. So blood, bone, saliva, urine, brain, cognitive phenomenon. So survey research is also available or eligible as well. Next is pediatric research. This is for individuals whose research is focused on diseases and disorders that impact individuals that are under the age of 18. The great thing about the pediatric research LRP is that basic research is allowable just because animal models may be more appropriate when you're investigating certain disease states. Next is the Health Disparities Research LRP. This is for individuals whose research focuses on minority and other health disparity populations. There's a wide swath of the types of research that are eligible under this particular LRP. And as I said in one of my introductory slides, the applications are reviewed by all NIH ICs. Next is contraception and infertility research. This is for individuals whose research focuses on investigating disorders that impact a person's ability to be able to conceive or bear children, as well as on new and improved methods for preventing pregnancy. This particular program is only funded by one institute, and that's the Child Health Institute. This is one of our smallest programs. Next is the what about, I'm sorry, I was about to read the question. I'm not going to do that right just yet. I'm going to finish the slide first. Next is the clinical research for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. This is the same as the clinical research LRP. However, this particular LRP is for investigators that are from what we call financially disadvantaged backgrounds. So let's just say, for example, you're eligible for a Pell Grant or some sort of need-based scholarship in college. You might be eligible to apply for this particular program. Lastly is the REACH program, and I talked a little bit about that in one of my introductory slides. So this particular LRP subcategory allows for institutes and centers to recruit, retain researchers that are pursuing major opportunities or gaps in emerging areas critical to human health. So the question stated is, what about those that are involved in multiple categories? This is where you're going to have to do a little bit of background research yourself, because you can only choose one particular LRP and only one IC. Well, you can choose two ICs, your primary and your secondary. However, this is where you're doing your background research, and talking to program officers will be really important, where it will be helpful for you to make the decision in order which programs to apply to. And I'll talk about that one a little bit later. Basic eligibility criteria. At the time that you receive your LRP, you must have your doctoral level degree. There is an exception for the Contraception and Infertility Research LRP subcategory. You must be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. You must be able to conduct research for a minimum of 20 hours per week during each quarter of support under your LRP. So what does that mean? It means that we're making payments on your behalf to your loan servicers once per quarter. So you must be able to conduct research for 20 hours per week for the entirety of your LRP contract, every quarter of your LRP contract. First contracts are for 2 years. And we state this because there's a lot of negotiation that individuals try to undertake. What if I conduct research for 40 hours this week, and then I do none for the next 6 weeks? It's supposed to average out to 20 hours per week. Educational loan debt. So an awardee's an applicant's educational loan debt must represent at least 20% of their annual base salary. We're not talking about any extra classes that you're teaching, any extra moonlighting that you're doing, just your annual base salary here. Next, for research funding and salary support, your salary support and your research funding must come from a domestic nonprofit source. You may not receive salary, you may not receive research funding support from a for-profit entity in order to be eligible to apply for this program. If you have additional questions about your specific circumstances, I think that I know that the phone number for the LRPs and my email address are included at the end of the presentation, so feel free to reach out to my office or to me. Qualifying loans. So NIH will repay loans from your undergraduate degree all the way up until the time that you apply for your LRP. We will repay educational loans that are backed by the U.S. government and from U.S. accredited academic institutions and commercial lenders. If you've received loans from international institutions, even if they have branches here in the United States, it is still considered to be a non-U.S. center. So those loans would not be eligible. I say this because I get this question often. So what will NIH not repay? We will not repay non-educational loans. We will not repay plus loans to parents. That's sad for me because I have a college-age son. We will not repay loans to non-U.S. governments or institutions like I mentioned before. If you have a service obligation, let's just say like for a T32, you may not repay two service obligations at the very same time. So let's just say if you're on a T32, you will have to defer your service obligation because the LRP service obligation, which is you conducting your research, comes first. Don't be afraid. It doesn't mean that you cannot apply for the LRP. You just need to let us know that, and we can help you to defer the other service obligation until you're done with your LRP. Also, if you are considering the loan repayment program, any loans that are consolidated with another individual, whether it's your parents, whether it's your spouse, or whether it's your children, those loans would not be eligible because they no longer belong to you. So if you're considering applying for this program, please consider not consolidating your loans with another individual. This slide is a little bit busy, but there are just a couple of things that I want for you to gather from this slide. Basically, there are our three largest programs are the Clinical Research LRP, the Pediatric Research LRP, and Health Disparities Research LRP. Those are our largest, most popular programs. I also want for you to understand that the success rate for FY 2020 was about 51%, and we awarded over $87 million in student loan repayment. What does that mean? That means that you can have a good shot, but you have to apply in order to be eligible. So I really want for you to consider this. Congress considers this program to be so important that they're awarding between $70 and $80 million every single year just to support this program. Alrighty. I've mentioned this before, but we'll talk about it a little bit more, is that this is a congressionally mandated program. Congress makes sure that there's a set aside for this program every single year. So they want to know, is this program living up to its goals? Is it keeping people, engaged in their academic research careers? If it's not, they're going to get rid of it, right? So what we did a few years ago is that we conducted an assessment of the programs. And what we did is that we compared individuals that had received an LRP award versus those who had not. So they applied, they got the award, or they didn't get the award. And then we followed them over 15 years. Just to see kind of what was happening with regards to their career. And we developed this term called persistence in research. What does that mean? Really, it's an indicator of activity, career-related activity. Are they publishing? Are they applying for grants? Are they getting grants? Are they engaging in other scholastic activity? And you can see for yourself from the time that these individuals applied to the LRP, received the LRP, and 15 years out, there is a difference between those individuals who were able to receive LRP funding versus those who are not. This graphic, let me just note, does not mean that if you never receive an LRP, your career will not be successful. That is not what this career is, that is not what this slide is indicating. What the slide does indicate that there's something about receiving an LRP that gives careers an added boost. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So we asked people specifically, what were some of the career and personal related benefits of receiving the LRP? Of course, the first thing that they said is that there's relief from having to pay back those student loans because you're at a really vulnerable career decision point and you're looking at how much you're owing for student loans every month and what else you have to live on. And a lot of people are in a sandwich generation. They're caring for parents, they're caring for their children, they've got other responsibilities as well. I've been there myself, so I really understand what that's like. They also indicated that they had more ability to pursue other career-related passions and not necessarily worry as much about their salary. Of course, all of us are worried about our salary, right? But what I've been told is that I've been able to pursue other fellowship opportunities, or I've been able to engage in X, Y, and Z when otherwise I wouldn't have, because I knew that money was tight, and this allowed for me to do so. There's also protected research time, which is important for any and everybody, but specifically important for individuals who are in institutions that have high teaching loads, or when you have a high patient load. So if you are stuck in the clinic a lot, or if you're teaching a lot of classes, you don't really have as much time to engage in reading FOAs, responding to FOAs, building research collaborations, talking to potential collaborators, to applying for grants. For all of those things, actually being engaged in your research. So protected research time is absolutely important for you to be able to launch and continue on with your research career. And I think that is really that element of that guaranteed protected research time, because your institution is guaranteeing, they're signing on a dotted line and a document to the federal government, this person, Lourdes Guerrero, is going to have 20 hours per week every quarter that she can devote to her research time, and we will not infringe upon that. It also gives an individual practice and preparation for applying for other NIH grants. We did this on purpose. So we formulated the application process and the requirements for it, the documents that are required for it, specifically after a K award. So what I call the LRP is kind of like a grown-up F or a mini K, because it's somewhere in between, right? So the LRPs typically are the first award that an investigator has applied for on their own without the help of any kind of mentors. So we wanted to make sure that it was in line with what they were going to be seeing in the future. There's also that added boost to career preparedness and increased productivity over time, which you saw in the last graphic, as well as the ego boost that you need in order to see that you can do this. I think that from the time we started our own student internships, that all we heard was that being able to have a successful research career was really hard. It's so hard to write papers. It's so hard to be in research. It's so hard to get grants. We always hear all of this negative, right? We don't really hear about the positive. But right off the bat, for individuals who are receiving the LRPs early in their careers, they not only are understanding that they are in a critical research area that NIH considers to be important, but they're also fundable. So now let's talk a little bit more about the Lrp application components itself. And I'm comparing the Lrp components kind of like a roadmap, because your reviewer is your major audience for any grant application. So your application serves as the reviewer roadmap, how you're laying out how you see your career progressing. So really within the application, you're important. Who's the candidate? What is it that's important about you, right? Where are you going? What's your mentoring plan? What are your plans for yourself, for your career goals? What's your route and your timeline? What's your research plan? What's your timeline? Where are you? Why is your environment important? It's absolutely important. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Also, who are your co-pilots? Who are those people that are on your team that are helping to support you for your ultimate dream of a research career? So I think that the first place that a reviewer goes to, besides your specific aims, is to review your personal statement, your mentoring and training plan, and your proposed research plan. So now let's talk about that just a little bit. So within your personal statement, what are you going to be including? Really here, you want to highlight your previous training, how you develop your scientific interests, what are some of your recent accomplishments, short-term and long-term goals. Really, this section kind of gives the reviewer an idea of who you are and what your ultimate goals are. Really for the F, the LRPs and the Ks, it's the only time where they're interested in who you say you want to be and what your goals are and who you are as a person and how these things all come together to help paint a picture of where you see your career going. Why is this important? Because there will be thousands of people who are applying for an LRP. I can guarantee you that every last one of them can turn water to wine. They can feed the multitudes with fish and a few loaves of bread. They can probably raise a few people from the dead. If you cannot separate yourself from the pack, How's a reviewer going to be enthusiastic about your application? They need to know, what is it that is about you? Why should NIH get out of bed, right? Why should they want to be enthusiastic about funding your research? Okay, and it starts with what you put into your personal statement. The mentoring and training plan. This is really an opportunity for you to address where you're going to be going in the next phase of your research career, and what are the things that you need, or what are the things that you're preparing for, and how are you going to do those? So this needs to address your specific career goals. What's the next career transition for you? How are you preparing to meet those particular goals? So for example, are there particular techniques or skills that you'd like to acquire along your pathway to research independence? Are there professional development or leadership development opportunities that you're going to be engaged in? Are there specific conferences? Are there specific collegial relationships or collaborations that you're involved in, or that you're going to be growing over the next several years? Make sure you're going to be including timelines for this. This is really important. Also, any training activities must also relate with your research plan. So the research plan, the mentoring plan, as well as the research and the mentoring plan must gel together. They must make sense together. Okay, so don't just propose, I don't know what to propose, so I'm just going to talk about, I don't even know, whatever, right? You really need to make sure that this whole plan makes sense. Always say you need to lead a reader where you want them to go. So if you're not clear on your plan, guess what? A reviewer is not going to be clear on the plan either. And what are they going to do? They're going to fill in the gaps on their own. That's just human nature. Typically, though, they don't fill in the gap with, I guess they know what they're doing, I'll just give them credit for that. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to say, well, maybe this person isn't really quite sure of how to get to the next phase of the things that they should be doing. So that dampens my enthusiasm for this application just a little bit. Next, proposed research plans. I don't have to tell you guys about that. You've been doing that for years and years and years. However, for this application, it's really important that you talk about your specific roles and responsibilities, and that you include timelines. Why? Because LRP contracts are for 2 years only. So don't put in 6 specific aims, because the reviewer is going to look at this and say, what is this award is only for 2 years. Why are they putting in 6 aims? They clearly don't have an idea of how long these are all going to take, right? Research environment is super duper important. Why are you where you are? Who's important there? What's important there? What's your institutional track record? What are they committing to you? Why is it important that you are where you are at this particular moment in time? And how is it going to help you to build your research career? Is it people there? Is it resources there? Is it patient populations? Is it something else that's there that provides some sort of gluing element for you? So that it will help you to launch into the next phase of your research career? You should be very specific about this. As well, when they're giving you letters of recommendation, because you need a letter of recommendation from someone at your institution, you need to make sure that it's really enthusiastic. They're really enthusiastic about your presence on the faculty and what you're going to be contributing to your environment overall. Loan information is only for new applicants. So don't think that if you have a little bit of loan debt, then you're going to look better than a person who has a lot of loan debt, because that's not a part of the review at all. The IC see that later, or the institutes and centers see that information later. So just be honest about it, because if you tell me that you only have $10,000 worth of student loan debt, that's what we're going to pay you for when you really have $100,000. So just put it all out there. Don't be embarrassed. You're going to be in line with the other 2,000 people that are applying for this award as well. So what are reviewers looking for? So they're looking at the elements of your application to gauge your potential to succeed in an independent research career. What does that mean? So they're looking at the elements that you provided. So they're looking at what you say was your previous training and research experience and how that's connected to where you want your career to ultimately go. They're also looking at your commitment to a research career. What the heck is that? Really, this is one thing that I find important to say all the time, but it is the dumbest thing. Put in your application that your goal, your ultimate goal, one of your ultimate goals is to be an independent researcher, because I swear to God, a reviewer will say, I don't really know what they want to do. I don't know if they really want to pursue research, into the future. Are they looking to launch into research independence? Sounds really crazy. Just put it in there a couple of times. But also, your commitment to your research career is going to be based off of, or their reactions to what you put into your mentoring training plan, your career development plan. It's going to be really important for how they think or their gauging of your commitment. Another thing that's really important for your commitment is the strength and quality of your letters of recommendation. I have people all the time that will submit a letter of recommendation from a person who is really important in their particular field of research. This person gives 2 lines of text. There's nothing worse than a bad letter of recommendation. You can almost dismiss that from time to time than a lukewarm recommendation from a really important person. Why? That means that they didn't take the time, or maybe they don't even know you well enough to really put into a letter of recommendation what's your impact on the field, how they're going to help you to sustain your dream of a research career, and what are they going to add to your training and development. There's nothing worse than a bad one than a lukewarm one from an important person. So what do you do in order to help that? I always ask when I'm writing letters of recommendation, I ask individuals what it is they would like for me to include. What are some of the important highlights that they would like included in their letter of recommendation? I don't think people mind. I think that they're happy to receive information from you to say, would you mind to include information on X, Y, and Z? So you can include up to 5 letters of recommendation. Sorry about that. So you can include up to 5 letters of recommendation for the LRPs. Make sure that each one of these individuals is addressing something different about you. Why are they present in your letters of recommendation? They must have some sort of significant role, okay? Quality and appropriateness of your research environment, we kind of talked about that. We also kind of talked about strong institutional support, the 20 hours a week, the space, funding, whatever it might be that they're giving. I don't care what it is that they're giving to you. Make sure that they're indicating this within the letter of recommendation. It is very, very important, okay? Research progress. This is only important for those individuals who are renewal applicants. I promise you, if you don't treat this section with the amount of respect that it should, because some people just think, oh, I'll just add whatever in there, and then you're going to get a renewal. I almost guarantee you that you're not. I can almost guarantee you that you're not. Because remember, I said there are 2,500 people that are applying for this. All of them are water walkers, they're wine changers, and dead raisers. So the thing is that if you're not also tracking for adequate progress, if you're not listing the kinds of progress, research progress that you've made since your last application, they're going to change you out for somebody else like that. So make sure that you're adding whatever elements of progress that you possibly can within your application. Nothing is too small. Nothing is too big. Just make sure that you're generous to yourself. And I think that researchers from time to time have a really hard time kind of giving themselves kudos with regards to their progress. So what are some common mistakes with applying for the LRPs? Not talking to a program officer. This is your #1 kiss of death. Oh, I read the FOA or I read the notice. That means that you have the same information that every Joe Schmo just read. Is that good enough for you? It should not be. You should want to understand exactly how your research aims fit in with the priorities and the mission of this particular institute and center. Also, there should be several ICs that fit within your work. So you might say, oh, you know what? I think that my work fits along for the priorities for this particular FOA for NINDS as well as NCI. I'm going to call both of those program officers so that I can understand where I should be applying. You really want to get to understand the secret sauce, and you will never understand that unless you talk to a program officer. Never, ever understand that. You could have 2 aims that really fit well, within the priorities for an IC, and then that third one is like, I don't really know about that. That can make the difference between you getting funding and not. But you didn't know because you didn't call someone. Well, email them first. Don't just cold call, because a lot of times people are busy, right? Just like I just denied the phone calls that I just had. They're looking at it like, oh, okay, well, who's this calling me out of the blue? I'm about to go into another meeting, or you snatch them for 5 minutes. That's not enough time to really get all of your questions answered. So just take the time out, send them an email, schedule a time to talk. Rest preparation, you guys have been reviewers yourself for all kinds of different mechanisms. Nothing dampens your enthusiasm more than simple mistakes. There are a lot, just making simple errors within your application, not having a well laid out research plan or mentoring plan. It kind of, it dampens the enthusiasm. So make sure you're not rushing through it. Don't leave it to the last minute. I tell people that every single year. The application deadline is usually November the 15th. Don't start this process on the 12th. Give yourself a real shot at being successful with this application by giving yourself time. Questionable research commitment and a weak research plan, failure to adequately describe your mentoring and training plan. This can all be worked out with talking this through with your mentors. Slim publication is not necessarily a kiss of death for any application, but you want to talk about any areas that you think may need more attention or need to be built upon in your application in a more positive way. As well, make sure that your mentor is addressing this in their letter of recommendation. So let's just say you do need to build your publication record. They're going to be talking about and addressing how they're going to help you to do that within their letters of recommendation. And you're also going to talk about that in your mentoring and training plan. So it looks as if you have a cohesive plan. Lukewarm recommendation letters, we've already talked about that. Oh, and not applying. You'll never get it if you don't apply. There are so many people I talk to every year. It's like, I've heard of the program, but I never applied. I never applied. And it's like, ooh. So for everyone who's on the call, how many people do we have on the call right now?
83.
83. Okay. Can they respond in the chat feature? They can respond in the chat feature, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Who all has heard of the loan repayment programs from NIH before? Can you put in a yes or a no? And usually when I don't hear from people, what I do is that I pick on people. I just pick them out, and now I can't see people's faces. Okay, so everybody's heard of this. Okay, stop replying, stop replying. Thank you. Okay, now, who all has applied? Say, type in applied if you've applied before. Okay, we got a few. Okay, that's great. Okay, great. So the thing is they've heard about this program. They've thrown their hat in the ring. So I'm hoping that when they applied, attempted to, but ran out of time, I understand that one. There's a lot of time. There's a lot that's due right around the same time of year. But I'm hoping that they reached out to program officers. If you applied, put in the chat feature that you reached out and talked to your program officer prior to the application. Say yes or no. Two yeses. Okay, 4 yeses. Okay, so if you did not receive the LRP, did you contact your program officer afterwards to get feedback on your application? Yes or no? No? Yes. It's really important that you reach out afterwards. One of the things about LRPs is that they're contracts and not grants. It's a tiny nuance, but it's important because you don't receive that passive feedback with summary scores and information. So you have to reach back out to a program officer to get good feedback on how to improve your subsequent application. And for those people who said yes, they did talk to the program officer before and afterwards, I'm going to include my email address here in the chat, and I'm hoping to hear from you about your experience.
Erica, we have a number of questions in the Q&A. Did you want to address those before you continue, or do you want to save those for later?
Oh, no, we can do it now.
Okay, so a couple of things that have come up. Questions around being a fellow on a T32 and whether or not they are still eligible for an LRP. Same with a F32 or a K.
Yes.
Can you still apply?
Yes. Yes, you can still apply. Now, of course, with the F32, T32, that means you have a service obligation, right? So that just means reach out to my office. We help you to defer the service obligation that's associated with the other award because the service obligation has to be completed for your LRP first. Another important thing to remember is that you have to have 2 years of protected research time when you're applying for the LRP for the first time. Okay, so for a new award. So at the time you're applying, you almost have to have 2.5 years because it's going to take you a little bit of time in order to be awarded the LRP. So you have to have 2 years of protected time from the time that you receive the LRP. So if you only have 1 year left at your institution, let's just say you have a 3-year postdoc and you're already in year 2, you're probably going to want to wait until the next career opportunity, because you're going to have you're going to be able to present a better overall picture of the next phase and where you're going to be for the next couple of years. Another question?
Yes. Does behavioral research fall into the clinical research LRP? Where does behavioral research fall?
It depends on what it actually is. So I have to know a bit more about that. I'm thinking in general, yes.
So also, in terms of income and the ratio of your loan debt to your income, is it based on individual income or household income?
Individual income, not household income. And we have a handy dandy calculator on our website that can kind of help you get a rough and dirty idea of whether you're eligible or not, or whether you meet that ratio. I know a lot of people are sweating, are like, oh my gosh, my wife has a job. Am I going to be able to be eligible? It doesn't include your spouse's income.
Another question, what about some guidance on determining if an application should be mentored or independent?
Really, this is a good one. If you're looking at applying for a K, or you have a K and it's just beginning, those are mentored awards. So you'd be a mentored individual. But if you're looking at in the next year applying for an R, then you might want to think about applying as an independent candidate. However, that means that you're up in the ante for your application. What does that mean? That means that you really have to have strong institutional support for your research career. That means that you probably have to have a lot of irons in the fire for as far as funding is concerned. What we typically tell people is that if you don't already have an R, or if you're not associate professor already, you should probably be thinking about applying as mentored.
Thank you. I'll ask some more questions in a little bit. Go ahead and continue with your presentation.
And Jasmine has one as well on diversity and biomedical. If you do research on diversity in the biomedical research workforce, would that fall under health disparities? It really kind of depends, right? We are a biomedical we're a biomedical centric institution. So there has to be some sort of biomedical outcome that you're looking at. So if so, then I would say yes, but really it depends on your endpoints, okay? This is where another reason for why talking to program officers is super duper important. So now let's move on with our next slide. So what should you be doing if you're still interested in applying for the LRPs? The first thing you have to do is have your ERA Commons ID. This is like your DNA fingerprint if you're going to be an investigator that is going to be submitting research grants to NIH. Now, if you've applied for the LRPs before, we had an additional feature where you could apply using your Google ID in order to start your application. But in order to submit the application, you had to have your ERA Commons ID and password. Now we've had some revisions to our online application system where a person is going to have to use Assist in order to apply for an LRP award. So you have to have your ERA Commons ID and your password active at the time that you start your application. This is another reason for why starting on November the 13th is going to be really important that you don't do. Don't wait until the last minute, because if you're at a smaller institution that is not really affiliated with NIH right now, it's going to take a little bit more time for you to receive your ERA Commons ID. So don't fool around with that. You can start today and get your ERA Commons ID. It's very important that you have that ahead of time. So review the LRP website, the published notices, review the mission and priorities for the institution and centers. Please, please, please reach out to your program officers. You already saw that the most common programs are clinical, pediatric, and health disparities. Starting September 1, which is when the application cycle starts, people are going to start to call their program officers. That means that you're going to end up getting in line, and your answers are going to be, your questions are going to be answered in the queue. So start to ask your questions now so that you're not having to wait several weeks sometimes, because some ICs get so many questions and they only have one person who's relegated to answering those. So you're at the bottom of the list. You don't want that to happen. You don't want to stall your application because you waited to reach out to a program officer who's so overloaded with questions right now, not just related to LRPs, but other mechanisms that, you don't really know what to do. Which programs am I going to apply for if I don't have information or feedback from my program officers? I emailed them last week, but they've already received 150 questions about the LRPs. So it's important that you start early. Talk to your mentors and recommenders about LRP. What they don't like is when they get an automatic email from us saying that you want a letter of recommendation and you haven't talked to them just yet. We have it happen over and over every single year. Also, talk to your lenders about how much you actually owe. It's not important that, you have, down to the penny when you apply, but it will be important as your application moves through stages of review. We'll need to know. My office will need to know. So here is a graphic of the extramural application cycle timeline. The magic number is September 1 to November the 15th. This is when the application cycle is open. We only have one cycle per year. So as Sean already knows, if you miss it, you gotta wait a whole nother year, okay? So this just takes you through the different phases of it. I kind of won't go through all of this. You all will receive a PDF of the slide deck. So you'll see this for yourself. But basically, you can see you're applying between September 1 and November 15th. And if you're able to receive the award, you won't get your first payment till probably about this November the next year. So it takes a full year for all of these things for this cycle to be completed. Resources. We have great resources to help you along the way to learn about the LRPs, includes the LRP website. Our contact and engage page, so super important. It has listed every single NIH institution and center that participates in the LRPs, plus a statement of their mission and priority areas so that you can start to kind of narrow down where you might want to be thinking about applying. LRP ambassador site. Do we have any LRP ambassadors on the call today? Any ambassadors? Yes? No? No. Okay, so who's an ambassador? An ambassador is a person who has received an LRP award or a person who supported a person through the LRP awarding process. They're so excited about the benefits that the LRPs have provided to their career that they're willing to help other people within their institutions as well as outside of their institutions. You can literally look this up and say, Lourdes Guerrero had an LRP award. I wonder what was her experience. Let me send an email to her. Sometimes individuals will also share parts of their old applications with you so that you can also see kind of where they went wrong or where there may be some things where you might want to mimic, some of the style or some of the elements that are included as well. Is so super important. We also have a data dashboard, a lot of information on data and statistics regarding the program. This will help you to narrow down where you might want to choose. For example, the clinical DB program is a small program, has a high success rate, but only because very few people can qualify necessarily for it. So your chances could be good once you apply, but if you're looking at it and say, they had 50 applicants last year and only 20 received an LRP, do I want to take that chance or do I want to apply for something else, right? NIH Reporter Tool, this is the Plenty of Fish, a dating app for researchers and money at NIH, I always kind of compare it to. I say that in jest. However, what is the NIH Reporter Tool? Really, it's an ability for you to be able to plug in almost any search term regarding your research, whether it's your abstract, your specific aims, almost anything. It's specific search terms. And you can find out, you can visualize for yourself who is funding that kind of work, which NIH IC is funding that work, via which mechanisms they're funding it, as well as the program officers who are responsible for those portfolios. That helps you to narrow down your choices. It also helps you to kind of expand your ideas as to who else might be interested in funding your work. When I was with NIDA, every year I'd make my funding decisions with regards to LRPs, and then another institute would come in and take all of the people that I didn't fund at first. But in between that time, when I submitted my primary selections, I go to the budget officer and say, please, can I have more money, sir? And if they gave me more money, great. I go back to my computer and try to pull up that secondary list. Half of the time they would be gone because NCAT would come in and scoop those people up. People would call me and say, Dr. Boone, what is NCATS? I didn't even know what they were, right? So that means that they didn't even have an idea that another institute and center at NIH would be interested in the kind of work that they were doing. So you're limiting your money sources, your research sources, your research funding sources, by not understanding who else is funding the kind of work that you're interested in. So in summary, and I hope I haven't gone over time, the NIH Lrps will repay over $100,000 over a 2-year period in educational loan repayment. And again, this depends on your debt level. We cover most of the federal taxes that result from getting the award. The initial contracts are for 2 years, and you're able to apply for Lrps over and over and over and over again. As long as an institute and center thinks that your work is something that they're interested in funding, they will continue to give you an Lrp award. So theoretically, you can go from having hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt down to nothing every single year. If you guys follow us on Twitter, you see the Twitter posts where people are like, I just got my student loans repaid, right? Jump in the ring and be one of those people. We have a 50% application success rate, and our application is going to be due on November the 15th this year, which is a Monday. It's going to be a Monday. That could be a problem for some people because there's not going to be anybody to answer your calls over the weekend with your questions. So make sure you prepare early. This is how you contact us, and I believe that is it.
Thank you so much. There are a number of questions still outstanding in the Q&A that I'd like to present. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So a couple of questions regarding qualifying for the Lrp. So if you are on an income-based repayment 10-year loan forgiveness program, would you still be eligible for the Lrp?
Yes, you are. That program was created several years after the loan repayment programs were developed, and they weren't developed in concert so that they worked together. I don't know why. However, why not go ahead and get your student loans repaid now as opposed to waiting for 10 years and maybe you get them paid off later on, right?
Also, do you qualify for the Lrp if you're on a diversity supplement?
Yes. Now, timing of how long you have on the diversity supplement can be important, but the general answer to that is yes.
And then there's a couple of questions regarding the protected research time. So how do you, if you have an agreement with your institution to have 50% dedicated research time, for example, does that make you eligible to apply, or do you need your research time to be confirmed by your amount of research funding, for example?
No, so the research time and the funding aren't correlated with regards to this application. So really your institution just has to be able to designate that you have protected research time. Clearly, if you already have that agreement, that's not something you got to worry about.
So that's not something that they have to send verification of other than when the institutional official signs off on your paperwork?
The institutional official there will confirm that. However, when you receive your Lrp, there is a confirmation process that happens right before every time we make a payment to you. So they also have to confirm that you still have that protected research time, you're conducting research at your institution, you are who you say you are, just so that we don't get into situations where people have moved on, they're no longer conducting research, and then we're sending them money, right? So we don't want to put people in situations where they're going to be in repayment to the federal government because they have separated from their institution. So we confirm that. We reconfirm it, but it's something that's passive in the background. They don't necessarily have to do that.
Perfect, thank you. Also, in terms of determining which mechanism to apply for, who would be the best person to determine that? Yourself, the program officer, your mentor? What if your mentor isn't super familiar with the Lrp?
I would think that the person who's ultimately responsible is the applicant. However, you use advice that you receive from your program officer in order to make that decision, as well as you doing your background research with reviewing the mission and priorities for each of the institutions, talking to different program officers, and then you use your best judgment with making that decision. Dr. Sunija, do you want to contribute to this question?
Yeah, I'm actually going to share my screen if I get a chance, so that can give them a glimpse of.
I will stop sharing.
To the depth of that knowledge. So for example, for the National Institute on Aging, it says, we are interested in biomedical social behavioral research in the aging process and then age-related diseases and whatnot, with a particular priority on Alzheimer's disease. So it already tells you that if you are working on Alzheimer's disease kind of a research portfolio, it kind of is actually telling you that you will have an outright advantage of getting a successful application, because we are putting too much priority on a particular Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's disease related dementia research at National Institute on Aging. And we, this also tells you that we are looking for at least 50% of the protected time for next 2 years. And it gives you the details on, on my being the representative for the Institute, my email and contact and all that. So yeah, I mean, this is how you really figure out which institute is dealing with what. And all of this information is on Lrp website that Erica just shared with you folks. So if you scroll up.
Can you tell everyone who you are?
What's that?
I don't think we introduced you.
Well, I am Sanoj Suneja, Deputy Director at the National Institute on Aging. And that's what I was sharing, the mission of my institute, with you folks at this moment. And our major priority is the Alzheimer's disease. So that
Dr. Suneja will be probably the person that you're communicating with.
Yeah. And this is my contact information on the website. If you ever need to reach me, I'm available most of the time via email. Email is the best source, so I can get more answers that I don't know and Erica knows, to get more details on them, and then pass it on to you folks when it pertains to the eligibility in particular, which they mandate more than us. We more mandate about the program and the priorities of the research that we are focused on. I'll stop at that and I'll stop sharing my screen as well.
And the great thing about talking to program officers who have really pertinent information about the priorities of their institution, they're not just program officers that have information about LRPs. Typically, they can be involved in training and research training, career development across their institution. So they have information about a broad array of different mechanisms that are available. So you should practice talking with your program officers, not just about the one mechanism that you're interested in, but what are the other ones that I should be keeping in mind? Thank you, Dr. Suneja.
Yeah, another query that I have seen come to me many times, that currently I'm mentored, but I will be having my own R01 next year, which I have just submitted. Which status should I fill? You always fill your current status, and that's an easy call to make. You cannot fill your future status that would be and is not even guaranteed. That's the common mistake or queries that I have gotten, which are kind of, self-assessment that you can make on your own. At the time, everything that you're submitting in your application has to be at the time of the application. Okay.
Thank you. Well, we have 1 more minute before our time is up. Any other words of wisdom that either one of you would like to share with our RCMAR scientists about applying or regarding their applications?
Dr. Suneja, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, our success rate is even higher than the NIH. We fund up to 62%. Last year, we funded 62% success rate for all of the LRP application, whether it was clinical research or health disparities and other mechanisms that we fund. Erica.
I would say use all your available resources and start early. So you have LRP ambassadors. You don't even know these people and they're willing to help you out. So make sure you talk to a couple of different LRP ambassadors so that you can kind of get their take on what was their process. What did they find important? What were their pitfalls, right? Also talk to mentors. A lot of times mentors have received LRP awards, but also following the K framework can also be of help as well. So maybe they haven't received an LRP, but all these people around you are probably in the process of applying for a K or already have applied for a K. So kind of use the lesson learned from that and build upon that for submitting your LRP award. Start early. Ask my information center as many questions as you deem necessary. We're here to answer your questions. Do not think that you're being a burden on anyone by asking questions. I always tell people, just remember, your program officers, the people at my information center, even me, we're standing in between you and your money. So make sure that you get in contact with us and you get answers to your questions prior to submitting your application, because all of this information is going to be helpful for you in order to submit the best application that you possibly can.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us this morning. Thank you to our participants for joining us today. We will be sending out the recording and the slides for those that couldn't attend or want to review those. You will be receiving an email from us with a short survey, so please feel free to give us your feedback on today's session. Again, thank you to everybody, and stay tuned. We have another webinar coming up next month on contextual factors that affect the health of diverse older adults, and some very interesting tools from some researchers that can that everybody can avail themselves of. So again, thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and don't forget to ask those questions and get your money, like Dr. Boone has just mentioned. Thank you.
And follow us on Twitter to receive some up-to-date information. There are a lot of questions in here that we didn't get a chance to answer, so just send us an email. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Guerrero.
Take care, everyone.